So back in code, we started with throwing in some views here. And of course, right now, this won't work. This will just break or will not render anything meaningful to the screen. In that first nested view here in this block, I want to have a text input and a button. Conveniently, both is provided by React Native. We have a text input here, and we also have a button component. So we can import both text input, which allows the user to enter text, and button. And then here in that view, in that first nested view, I'll add a text input as a self-closing tag because there's nothing we could pass between opening and closing tags. And for the button, you could think that you use a button like this, but actually that's not how this React Native button works. Instead, it's a self-closing button, and you set a title property to define which text to render there. And here we could say add. Now we have a text input and a button there. And if we save this, and this reloads, we see the button here, but we don't see the text input, right? So that's not working as intended. The reason for that is actually that the text input will be hidden here below the status bar. So now is the time where we should get started with adding some layout, some structure to this page. Because just adding components alone won't do the trick. A React Native app is all about using components and then adding the right layout, the right structure to your components. So here, for example, it would make sense to add some general padding around that views on this top view. Padding basically is some distance from the border of that view, which is basically the device frame in our case here, since I'm talking about the topmost view, to the content of the view. So some spacing between the borders of that topmost, of that surrounding view, and the content in the view. And for that, we can add the style property here on the view. Most components in React Native support the style property. The view does. And there you use this dynamic content binding here, which you know from normal React 2 with the single curly braces. And style expects a JavaScript object now. So we add another pair of curly braces here. And now a common mistake is that you think this is a special syntax which requires double curly braces. Indeed, it's the normal React syntax with single curly braces, where then the dynamic value you're passing to style just happens to be a JavaScript object. Hence, we have another pair of curly braces. And in this object, you can now have key value pairs where the keys are your style property names and the values are, well, the values for these style properties. And these style property names are influenced by CSS. So here what you can do is you can add padding that exists in React Native as well. And a comprehensive list of supported style properties can always be found by going to the component you're using, like the view here, and then by clicking on the style property. And here, if you click on view styles, you see a list of all provided properties which you can use. And you see some special properties for the view here, and then some general props like layout props. And there you would find the padding, for example. So that's how you can find out what's supported, but you'll also see many examples throughout this course. So here I add padding. And the value now can just be a number, which will be device-independent pixels. So a pixel value, which always looks good no matter which device size you have. So here we could add 10. And if we do that, now we see the button is a bit further down. Maybe let's add 30 here so that we can see a bigger difference. And now that's working. And now if you tap above the button, you don't really see an input here, but you see that my soft keyboard opened up on Android. On iOS, it doesn't open by default, but there also you can tap here. And if you tap often enough, or if you go to hardware and then keyboard, toggle software keyboard, it should open up there as well. So here we also have an input. So now we can see that input because now it's not behind that status bar anymore. So adding that padding probably made sense because now we made sure that our layout is inside of our screen here. Now there are other tools for making sure we have enough padding here as well, but for now let's manually set the padding and let's maybe set it to a value of 30. So we were getting started with the layout. Now let's go back to this component and let's make sure we can see something. We can see that there's a text input and we don't just have to guess it. For this we can go to the text input and there, for example, add the placeholder prop. And just as before, to find out what you can set, you can always go to the official docs. In this case, to the text input docs. And there you find a description on how to use it and some examples. But if you scroll down, you also find all the props you can set. And there, for example, you find out that you can set a placeholder prop, which is that dummy text that is shown before the user entered some text. So here that takes a string, and here we could enter course goal, because you should be able to set your course goal here. And if you do that, you see both on Android and on iOS there is this course goal text. Now still, it could be a bit better, it could be a bit clearer that there is a text input. And therefore here I'll also add a style, another inline style. And here I'll set a border bottom color of black. Black now is a string. Such color shortcuts are supported in React Native, and a comprehensive list of all available colors is attached to this lecture here. And I can also set a border bottom width of, let's say, 1. And what this does is it should set a bottom border on this input, so that now if we go back, we have that underlining here. We can clearly see it on iOS. And since there still is not that much space on iOS, let me actually ramp up this padding up here to 50 maybe. Yeah, that looks better. So now we have that border below our input, and that makes it clear that there is an input here. Of course, you're not restricted to only setting a border on the bottom. You could also just set a general border by leaving out bottom here, a border color and a border width. And if you did that, then this would be surrounded by a border. Now, one important note regarding these style names here, these style property names, you of course see that it's border width, border color written like this. In normal CSS, you would have border dash color, and that would apply the border color, but that would be an invalid property name in JavaScript, which is why this is not supported. Now, actually, a valid property name in JavaScript would be if you wrap this in quotes, though. But even that is not supported in React Native. So these alternative syntaxes, for example, this syntax would work in JavaScript if you apply some style to a web HTML element. These syntaxes are not supported in React Native, though. There you really have to use this camel case syntax where you, for example, write border color like this. Or in short, you have to use the property names you also find in the official docs. There are no alternative names for these style properties. And we could now also add a padding here of, let's say, 10, so that we have some spacing between the border and the actual part where we enter something. And I'd say this already looks way better, and we can clearly see that we here have an input where users can enter something.